Hello and welcome everyone to the series of A to Z chess opening series. In today's episode, we are going to learn about the alphabet F. And from F, we have the French defense, the rock solid French defense. Now, French defense is the best opening to beat 1e4. If your opponent plays 1e4 and you always reply with e5, then one common problem you might have always faced is the weakness on the f7 square. Now, after the bishop to c4 move, the aggressive bishop's opening, f7 kind of remains weak as it is vulnerable, only protected by the king. So there are some problems on the f7 square. If you're afraid and especially a beginner player, then I would recommend you to start learning and playing the French defense, because in French defense you are going to play a pawn to e6, closing this diagonal for the bishop to come, right? So f7 is no longer a weakness for you. Also, to play this opening you might have to learn a little bit of theory, but even if you are not very good with the theory, you can still manage to play this opening well. It will be solid. You just have to do the normal logical moves. So let's go ahead. Here, after the pawn to e6, if he plays his pawn to d4, we are going to reply with d5. Now, the most common line here is to play the knight to c3. There are other variations as well, wherein they exchange, we call it as the exchange variation, or they promote their pawn up, that is the advanced variation, or the classical one by playing the knight to c3. In this episode, I am going to share with you mostly about the knight to c3 move. If he plays his knight to c3, then we are going to capture on e4. Now, this is a very good and a solid line. You just exchange the pawns in the center. Now, he captures it back with the knight on e4 square. Now, there is only basically one problem in black's camp. When you play pawn e6, the development of the bishop on c8 gets hampered. You cannot develop that bishop on a long diagonal. So the only weakness or the only problem, just try to settle it out. Play your bishop to d7 and maneuver it, relocate it to c6. You are attacking the knight, and down the road you will be also attacking the g2 and the rook there. So the bishop will have to stay there for a long time. So this can be your idea. You play your bishop to d7. Now again, if he plays a normal developing move like the knight to f3 square, then we are going to relocate our bishop as following the plan. Play the bishop to c6, attack the knight. To go back with the knight would be a little passive. Also, the knight is doing a great job in the center. White might just defend it by playing the bishop to d3. Now, after the bishop to d3 move, you play a knight to d7. Knight d7 here is kind of very much important or useful, because with this bishop on d3, he might try to jump in with the knight from f3 to e5, trying to attack your bishop, right? You have already used two of the moves. One was on d7 and the other one that you went on c6. Now again, if the attack comes, then we are wasting our move of the pawns and we will be losing the tempo. So it's better that you play a knight to d7 and don't allow him to come with his knight to e5. All right. Now here, if he plays a normal move like just castle, for the quick development, once the development is complete, you need to move the king into the safety. He castles, now you go with the knight to f6, putting a lot more pressure on the e4 knight. So you're attacking it twice, he's defending it once. There are various ways to continue this game. The best way one is counterintuitive, to go back, that is passive, but many of the players, we are going to look at the different lines or the different variations what mostly players would play. So one of the most common line is, since the knight is under attack, would want to just exchange. So here, if he captures on the f6 square, now usually the opponent would think that the knight from b8 went to d7 to capture on the f6 square, protecting that. But we are not going to do that. We are going to surprise our opponent by playing our queen to f6. Now queen to f6 puts a pressure on this f3 pawn, f3 knight, as well as on the d4 pawn. So both of those pieces are hanging. Now we capture here, the pawn structure will be ruined. All right. Here, if he plays his bishop to g5, trying to give an attack to the queen, then he is absolutely failing it, and that's a disaster, because you're going to win a piece. You capture on the knight first. If he captures your queen, then you go and capture the queen. Once the pieces gets exchanged, you are having an extra knight. Bishop for a bishop, two rooks for two rooks, you are going to have an extra knight. So bishop g5 is a complete blunder. That's a disaster move. Players would not play that. What if instead of playing the bishop to g5, they just play the pawn to c3? trying to protect the pawn on the d4 square. Then we are going to exchange the knight. If the pawn captures this, then again it's a blunder, opening up the king's file with the queens on the board. So that is dangerous for white. So here I don't think your opponent would play the bishop to will capture you on the f3 square with the pawn, but would with the queen. So even if the queen captures it, you capture it back with your queen, and this position is completely good for black here because we are ahead in development. We have destructed the pawn structure there, and sooner or later you can just try to open up the files and you will be doing fantastic in that position. Correct? All right. Let's have a look. What if he's not capturing your knight? Instead, what if he's playing the bishop to g5, trying to pin your knight to the queen? So you just unpin it. Play your bishop to e7 and unpin it. If he captures now on the f6 square, you capture it back with the bishop. Bishop takes it, and now instead of capturing with the knight, you already know the plan. You capture it back with the queen. Queen captures on f6, aiming to attack on f3 with the knight and the bishop and trying to expose the opponent's king. If here he plays his pawn to c3, then we are going to just exchange and long side castle. That is what our plan is. Here, after opening, let's say he captures you, you capture it back. The bishop has to go back. Let's say the bishop goes back on the c2 square, and now you activate your rook. Get your rook into the opponent's home. Play the rook to d2. You're attacking the bishop. The bishop saves himself, and the position will be completely bad for white because you are very much active over there. So this is one line when he would try to pin your knight to the queen. What if he's not pinning the knight to the queen? Instead, he is playing his rook to e1. If the rook comes on the e1 square here, you go bishop e7, trying to develop the last piece left. The pawn comes to c3, protecting the pawn on d4, weak castle. After the bishop comes on the f4 square, now you can exchange in the center. If you feel like your position is kind of stuck and you're not able to um, play well, then what you can do is just get the knight to d5, attack the bishop. It will be a waste of move, or just exchange on the e4 square. Let's say we capture, bishop takes on e4, bishop e4, knight e4, rook e4, and with a quick development, we are going knight f6 there, right? So again, fantastic position. The rook has to go back, and we are doing amazing. All right. Now there are two more options. What white can do here is to go back. As I already mentioned, it is counterintuitive, right? To go back is kind of passive, but actually that's the best move. What if he goes with the knight to g3? The best move here is to play the bishop to e7. You go ahead with the development, you play a bishop to e7. If now the knight comes on the e5 square, then we exchange it, the pawn captures it, and this is in complete black's favor. Why? Because we are going to go queen d5. What is your target? Your aim is to attack on g2, to give a checkmate on the g2 square. If he defends it by playing the pawn to f3, then he is going to lose the pawn on e5. Simple. All right. So in the beginning of this video, I mentioned that there is a different way of continuing the game. Some might just exchange it. If they exchange the pawn on the d5 square, then the problem of this bishop is solved. You can just exchange pawn with the pawn and you're doing fantastic, right? Or if he is just advancing the pawn, let's say e5, then we go c5, attack the pawn chain, the base of the chain. If he plays his pawn to c3, then you can play a knight to c6, putting some more pressure over here. And later your idea is to play queen to b6 and win the pawn. So if you liked this variation and would like me to share more insights on the exchange variation as well as the advanced variation, comment down in the chat and I'll make a video on that in the next series. So thank you so much everyone for tuning in. I hope this will be helpful and you will try playing the French defense against 1e4 and might win a lot of games as well. Stay tuned for more such amazing videos and I'll see you again. Till the time, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, share with your chess friends.